2x squared plus 6x plus 1 is equal to 0. There are no factors of 2 and 1 that can possibly either add up to or give you a difference of 6. Consequently, this problem is not factorable. That doesn't mean you can't solve it. That means you can't solve it by factoring. There's got to be another way. Well, there is, and that's using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That is the quadratic formula. The a and the b and the c come from the standard form of the equation that is quadratic. A is the coefficient of the term being squared. B is going to be the coefficient of the term raised to the first power. And C is going to be your constant. That's where the A and the B and the C come from to put into this formula. So here's my problem. Step number 1, you want to identify A, B, and C. Okay. Now, when you do these problems, do you have to do these exactly the way that I'm doing here and write all this down? No. I'm doing this for illustrative purposes to start with. If you can skip some things down the road, that's fine, but I want to show you exactly where everything comes from. In this problem, A is going to be 2, B is going to be 6, C is going to be 1. So we went ahead and identified A, B, and C. Now, let me caution this to you because people do this all the time, and I'm talking to you from experience. A is not 2x squared. B is not 6x. C is not, okay, it's just the coefficient of the term. Okay, just the coefficients, not the letters themselves. From this point on, really, I'm going to go through it with you, but it's being able to just substitute the numbers in for the letters and then using your calculator. So let's take a look and see what we got. I have x equals negative b. That gives me negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 6 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 1, all over 2 times a, which is 2. So what it came down to very simply was, every place in that formula where there was an a, I put in a 2. Every place there was a b, I put in a 6. Every place there was a c, I put in a 1. That's all there is to it. Now, really, from this point on, I really can't help you much. It's pretty much you and your calculator. I've got negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared is 36. Negative 4 times 2 is 8. Times 1 is going to give me, again, negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, all over 2 times 2, which is 4. I've got negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 8 is going to give me 28 all over 4. So I've got x equals negative 6 plus the square root of 28 over 4. And I've got x equals negative 6 minus the square root of 28 over 4. The plus and the minus is what gives you your two answers, because we said when you solve a quadratic equation, you're going to come up with two answers. Okay, with two answers. That's where the plus and the minus give those to you. Negative 6 plus the square root of 28 divided by 4. Negative 6 minus the square root of 28 divided by 4 are my two answers. Are there any questions up to this point? Yes?
So we would never try to break it down any less than that?
Well, I'm going to get to that in just a second. But are you okay up to here? Okay. Now, when you were in high school, you would end up having to put this into its simplified radical form, which means that you would have taken the square root of 28, broken that down into the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. So the square root of 28 would actually be 2 rad 7. You'd have negative 6 plus or minus 2 rad 7 over 4. You'd factor out a 2. You would go ahead and cancel out the 2's, and that would give you your final answer in final radical form. That's great. I don't want that. The reason I don't want it is this. We're now going to put this into a whole number and a decimal because we're going to use this for graphing purposes when we are going to go ahead and use quadratic functions to solve business problems. So we need a place to put the point on the graph. negative 6 plus or minus 28 divided by 4, or negative 3 plus or minus rad 7 over 2, neither one of those tell me anything. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use our calculator. All right, so here we go. I'm going to let you do this. We've got negative 6 plus the square root of 28 divided by 4. And we've got negative 6 minus the square root of 28 divided by 4. Tell me what you come up with. Okay? Just use your calculator. I'm going to punch it in. Negative 6 plus the square root of 28 equals, then divided by 4, because if you don't do that, you're going to get the wrong answer because your calculator is not going to do order of operations for you. Okay? So you're going to do negative 6 plus the square root of 28 equals, divided by 4 equals. Down here, you're going to do negative 6 minus the square root of 28 equals, divided by 4 equals, and we should come up with two answers here. What do we get?